Welcome, everybody. I'm going to give it a few more seconds while everybody enters the webinar, and then I'll get started. Okay, it looks like folks have had a moment to enter. Welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the Southeast New England Program Network, I'm excited to introduce today's webinar titled Implementing Stormwater Solutions in Southeast New England, Community Rain Gardens and Embankment Filters. The purpose of the SNEP Network webinar series is to showcase the work of our partners, as well as share out regional case studies and emerging topics relevant to the entire region. We're really grateful to have the opportunity to share this important work with communities across this area. My name is Alex Golachensky, and I am the SNEP Network Program Manager, and I'm located at the New England Environmental Finance Center at the University of Southern Maine, and I'll be managing today's program. Next slide. So before we get started, I just wanted to provide a little introduction and context on the SNEP Network and the SNEP region. The SNEP Network is a technical assistance and training program led by the NEFC, which is a regional technical assistance provider for EPA Region 1. The SNEP Network's mission is to empower communities to achieve healthy watersheds, sustainable financing, and long-term resilience through the management of stormwater and restoration projects. We focus on building low-cost local capacity through no-cost trainings, webinars, and hands-on technical assistance to communities within the region. The SNEP network is funded by the Southeast New England Program, or SNEP, which is a bi-state initiative of EPA Region 1 that supports clean water, healthy ecosystems, and sustainable communities across southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. You can learn a lot more about our partners and the work that we do at snepnetwork.org. And before we begin the webinar, I just want to provide a bit of logistics to keep in mind. Everybody who is attending is on mute to make sure that we can assure audio quality. You have the opportunity to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time throughout the webinar. We'll save all questions to the end where we'll have a Q&A session. You can find the Q&A box on the Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen. And we're looking forward to being able to answer questions at the end. As always, our webinars are recorded, and the recording, as well as any materials shared in today's webinar, will be sent to all webinar participants in a few days after the webinar and will be available on our website. I have the pleasure of introducing Tom Ardito, who is the director of the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants Program. Tom is with Restore America's Estuaries. Tom is going to provide a bit of an introduction to the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants Program, or SWIG, before introducing today's two SWIG community grant participants who will be presenting on their projects. And with that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alex. My name's Tom Ardito. I work for Restore America's Estuaries, which is a national nonprofit organization, and we partner with EPA Region 1 in Boston to help to manage the principal funding component of the Southeast New England program, which is as Alex indicated, directed toward funding, technical assistance, and coordination to help local entities with restoration of clean water, healthy ecosystems, and sustainable communities throughout Rhode Island and in Southeast New England. We've been managing the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants Program since 2018, Ray has, and since that time, we've awarded roughly 100 we call them SWIG grants for SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants, and totaling around $20 million. And it's really a wide variety of projects that we fund, everything from stormwater projects, which we'll be talking about today, more ecological restoration projects like wetland restoration and dam removals and river restorations and cranberry bog restorations, and then more innovative projects like permeable reactive barriers that are designed to intercept nitrogen flows in groundwater before they reach coastal waters. So really, and we fund a certain amount of like studies and plans, applied work directed at the first stages, sort of more conceptual stages of developing restoration projects in Southeast New England. So I'm very pleased today to be introducing a couple of our grantees who are working on stormwater practices, and these two projects are a little different, but both are aimed at improving water quality through better stormwater management. Uh, One of the projects is as you'll see, pertains to freshwater. The other one pertains to coastal waters. One is, being carried out by a state agency, led by a state agency, while the other is more community driven. But they have both, a lot of commonalities and then also some dissimilarities that I think will be interesting and hopefully instructive. And I think this webinar, I want to thank Alex and her team for putting it together, because a big part of the SNEP program is not just supporting individual projects, but to try to share the experiences of those projects. And, a big part of our goal is to elevate the practice of restoration throughout Southeast New England and beyond. And in this case, just by sharing the experiences of these organizations, I hope it'll inspire other connections and other work that gets done throughout the region. So our first speaker is Nick Cristofori from Comprehensive Environmental. He's working with the Massachusetts Division of Conservation and Recreation, who's our grantee. This was a $100,000 grant that we gave to DCR in 2023 for an embankment filter, which is kind of a innovative approach to stormwater management on a steep slope up at Lake Quinsigamond in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'll also introduce Deborah Berger and Robert Lowell with DCR, who are our grantees, and again, Nick is the principal project manager and engineer on the work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Great. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Let me just get my presentation up here. So hopefully you can see my slides momentarily. Okay. Um, yeah, so thanks again. So again, my name is Nick Cristofori with CEI, or Comprehensive Environmental. I've been doing stormwater related, drainage related, flooding related, water quality type work for about 20 years or so now with Comprehensive Environmental Incorporated, or CEI. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to present on this project. It's a little bit unique in that we're kind of looking at doing stormwater improvements where you typically may not thinking of you're doing stormwater improvements. So, Tom, you kind of touched on this already, but the goal is essentially to pilot and design an embankment filter as a stormwater control measure that can be installed on slopes that typically would be considered probably a little bit too steep for a conventional stormwater improvement best management practice installation. So the photo below shows kind of a more typical stormwater BMP location. These typical locations that are in a flat area, sort of near a parking lot. And, the benefits of these areas are numerous. You have more room typically for implementation of a BMP, more options. You're located closer to the impervious area that you're trying to capture. And so that's going to mean less money, less piping, less structures typically. But as these typical kind of low-hanging fruit sites get developed, you're going to be limited with a little bit more of these non-conventional approaches, hence this type of pilot project, where rather than locating it on these flatter areas, we're locating it on a hill. And, for better or for worse, there's benefits to both options. I mean, by locating it on a hill like this, you're preserving those flatter areas for something different that may be used for not for stormwater treatment, either parking lot and expansion or, something else that could be more beneficial to site users, park users, et cetera, et cetera. And this project is a little bit unique as well, and in that it's actually the final phase of what ended up being a three-phase project to eliminate untreated runoff through a stormwater outfall. The initial phase was conducted several decades ago, I think, that removed runoff from a portion of Lake Ave, as well as, I believe, a portion of the parking lot associated with that large building in the background there. More recently, DCR removed a large portion of the remaining parking lot, which was going to this outfall, and routed it through a rain garden. So this is kind of like the last piece of the puzzle to get rid of what was previously an untreated discharge and now is going to be removed entirely. So just quickly on the watershed and the receiving water. So the site is located along the west side of Lake Quinsigamond, within a highly developed area. It's kind of sandwiched between Lake Ave and the lake itself. It's located near Route 9. Interstate 290 is located towards the north. The watershed itself is very highly developed, as you'd expect for a water body located on the border between Worcester and Shrewsbury. There's a mix of residential development as well as commercial and roadway development throughout the watershed, as well as located right along Lake Quinsigamond itself. Um, the lake itself, I believe, is artificially impounded. It's now about 4 miles long and has been used for decades now for a combination of swimming, boating, fishing, active, passive recreation, pretty much everything you could think of for a water body. Again, located within a heavily developed area, so it sees definitely a lot of usage throughout the whole entire year. So Lake Quinsigamond itself is currently listed as impaired for bacteria, dissolved oxygen, invasive plants, as well as a number of other impairments. And most notably, Lake Quinsigamond itself flows to the Blackstone River, which goes all the way down to into Pawtucket and Providence, Rhode Island. And depending on how far you go, it's essentially impaired for not to say everything, but pretty much everything. Phosphorus, there's nutrients, bacteria, TSS. There's metals once you get further down there towards the mill towns around Woonsocket. Um, so, definitely a lot going on with the water body and more specifically the site itself. So the site itself is essentially located directly next to a heavily used parking lot. Through much of the weekdays, it's used as a commuter parking lot for there's a UMass Amherst, or actually I think it's UMass Lowell medical center that's located across the street. So Monday through Friday, this entire parking lot is filled with cars in every available space, and oftentimes in areas that are not necessarily spaces. And throughout the weekends, there's a number of park users that are using it for swimming, fishing, et cetera, et cetera. There's actually a swimming beach kind of just to the south further of the photo on the left. And what's even a little bit more interesting is it's actually located at a part of the park called Regatta Point. And the reason is it's periodically used throughout the years for sailing regattas. So it was actually kind of interesting that the satellites happen to capture one of these regattas in place. So you can see that throughout the year you have these boat storage and not only boat parking, you have the boat staging areas, and then even next to where our pilot project location is, you can see the red and blue squares that are actually tents that get used for, I'm not sure, shade probably during the regattas themselves. I previously mentioned that there was a rain garden that was installed just kind of south of where our proposed pilot location is, which is capturing runoff that was previously untreated. There's the photo to the far right shows what it looks like relatively recently, along with a small informational kiosk that was developed. So our current site right now, which is what we're going to end up treating, discharges to the outfall as shown in these couple photos here. So the one on the right kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on at this location right now. So the existing outfall as it is located about 12 feet higher than the lake itself. The runoff is running down about a 2-to-1 slope. You can tell that over a period of years, various efforts have been made to try and stabilize this slope. You can see there's asphalt that's been poured there in various stages of um, deterioration. It's been undermined, it's heavily eroded, and kind of all of which is providing sediment and sedimentation down to the lake that is currently untreated. So what we're really looking at doing is trying to remediate at least some of these impacts to the lake by installing a stormwater control measure or a BMP, again, in an area that you wouldn't typically put it. So just some of the site constraints that we were dealing with as part of this project. So again, relatively steep, more or less kind of 4-to-1 slopes, as you can see in the two bottom photos. The one thing I haven't mentioned yet is if to make things even more difficult, at the bottom of the 4-to-1 slope, there's about a 4-foot high retaining wall that runs between the slope and about 10 feet away from the lake itself. And to make matters worse, again, it's a commuter parking lot. It's heavily used on weekends, weekdays, et cetera, et cetera. So, we really couldn't be sacrificing any parking areas and so on and so forth. So we tried to not try to make this difficult on ourselves, but we tried to kind of pick a site that you would certainly not be ranking at the top of your list to show that maybe something can be done at some of these locations with a little bit of creative thinking. So again, the last slide, I kind of mentioned that it's located close to the lake itself. So there was a number of environmental permitting issues that we had to deal with throughout the project itself. So we're very close to inland bank, as you can imagine. The entire project itself is located within the 100-foot Mass DEP buffer zone. We also had 15-foot and 30-foot local buffers associated with the Worcester Conservation Commission and their local regs that we had to contend with. And even more so, we also were in bordering land subject to flooding, which was actually a little bit surprising once we got into it because there's actually BLSF located above the retaining wall itself, which again is 4 feet high, 4.5 feet high, and which is a little bit surprising, but most of it is located down towards the relocated outfall, which I'll get to a little bit later. So total impacts ended up being about 4,600 square feet of permanent impacts within the buffer, another 10,000 and change within the temporary. Most of the temporary was associated with just grass seeding because the grass, as we were doing this project, we knew was going to get torn up by construction equipment, and the grass itself wasn't in great condition. So we wanted to, at least while we were out there, kind of take some steps to remediate and beautify the area while we were going to be disturbing it anyway. The permanent impacts are associated with the grading and the construction of the basin itself. And most of the bordering land subject to flooding was associated with the outfall itself and some riprap. Um, so it ended up not being really too big of a deal. I mean, we worked closely with the city of Worcester and Mass DEP Central Regional Office, and both were very amenable to the project and supportive. So we thank them for their support on this. So, what did we end up doing for this? Well, we ended up coming up with essentially a sand filter. We were a little bit limited again with the combination of the steep slope and then having to make it even more steep and the retaining wall about what we could do. So just kind of some of the key components of what we were getting at is in order to get some water storage is we had your existing grade, which is again about a 4-to-1. We had to do some new grading in order to kind of carve out an area to do some water storage that is again on the side of a slope. So we needed to carve out some area that could provide some storage without making it so steep that it couldn't be maintained or mowed, or that it would be detrimental, substantially detrimental to park users who, again, use this area a lot. So we ended up kind of carving out this area with some stormwater storage. And then down on the right is kind of like the primary features of what it is. So you have your sand layer, you have an underdrain layer to basically capture your runoff that goes through the sand, and then an impermeable liner because we don't want to be infiltrating at the site because again, it's located right behind that retaining wall, so we don't want to be contributing some hydraulic loading onto the retaining wall itself, or risking potential preferential pathway and a breakout of stormwater that could potentially break out along that slope further down and cause erosion or some other adverse impacts. So the same thing kind of in plan view or profile view rather. So you have your deep sump inlet structure in the pipes along with a sediment forebay and splash pad. So we wanted to make sure that we provided some different options and different potential for a removal of sediment before it gets into the actual SCM itself. Again, the sand filter layer, which then filters stormwater down into an underdrain. We incorporated an underdrain cleanout in case there was sediment or so on and so forth that maybe got into the underdrain and could plug it up. We also incorporated an outlet control structure with a high flow bypass, which I'll get into how this thing actually functions during some low flow events and then high flow events in the next couple slides, but just to kind of give you an overview of the different components. And the last thing that DCR ended up doing kind of during construction is they actually ended up planting a couple plants that are sort of optional, but they thought it'd be beneficial in the right to kind of beautify this area a little bit. So they planted some Arctic fire red twig dogwood and some low bush blueberry as well throughout the SCM itself. So how does this work during low flow conditions? So this would be, say, you get a relatively small storm event, maybe you get a half inch of rain over the course of a day or a tenth of an inch of rain here and there, something like that, kind of low flow event. So first, obviously, the water flows into the inlet control structure. The inlet control structure's deep sump provides some area for sediment TSS to settle out and accumulate to make maintenance easier. From there, it flows into the sediment forebay. From there, it flows over the berm and then it gets into the sand filter. And the sand filter is essentially designed as a relatively high capacity sand that's going to allow water to flow through relatively quickly, but not so quickly that it's not treated. So from there, it'll get into the underdrain because again, the system is lined with an impermeable liner. It can't infiltrate. Instead, it'll flow through the underdrain into the outlet control structure to the outfall and then eventually into Lake Quinsigamond. So right now it would be flowing untreated down that steep outfall with no treatment. Now it's getting at least some treatment that it didn't get previously. So as far as how it works during overflow conditions, so this would be in the event if you get a thunderstorm or just something that the sand filter itself is incapable of handling on its own. So again, it flows through the deep sump inlet control structure and the sediment forebay for TSS. It will continue to go through the sand filter and get some treatment down into the underdrain. However, it will also flow through the high flow bypass and into the outlet control structure and then flow down to the lake itself. So what this does is it prevents the sand filter itself from becoming overwhelmed or backing up into the system. So it's trying to provide an additional way that the stormwater can outflow and bypass the system safely while preserving everything and then still making it into the lake itself. So this is after construction. So the photo on the left is actually what it looked like after construction. You can see that everything was kind of disturbed, and eventually it will grow in. So the two photos on the right, we ran it through AI real quick just to kind of showcase theoretically what it could look like if the grass were ever to grow in. I'm not sure it will ever get quite this lush, but possibly, who knows? the two photos also show the low bush blueberry and the dogwood that we installed, as well as the inlet control structure and the outlet control structure. It's a little bit difficult to see based on the photos, but there is a small sediment forebay in front of the inlet, and even though it looks like the outlet structure itself is kind of flush with the bottom of the system, it's not. We kind of ramped it up, so there is some ponding, in other words, I guess, that will be allowed in this system before it actually gets to the outlet control structure itself. So as far as water quality improvements, so we were able to treat just about the 1 inch water quality volume. We came in at about 97%. One of the things that ended up being a little bit surprising is when we actually started the project, we thought there was going to be a bigger contributing area, but then once we kind of got into it, we realized how much of the existing contributing area had already been disconnected. We were limited somewhat by a relatively small contributing watershed. So we only have about 0.2 acres altogether. Only about 0.11 is actually impervious. So along with the relatively small contributing watershed and the site constraints that we had to deal with, kind of limits our reduction potential, or at least our water quality improvement and phosphorus reduction potential. Even more troublesome or problematic beyond that is that because we had the retaining wall, we couldn't infiltrate, which means that even further reduces our phosphorus removal. But we're looking at we got about 0.08, so not quite a tenth of a pound of phosphorus reduction a year, about 4 times that much of nitrogen, and then some TSS. And I mean, again, this is all based off of the EPA BMP accounting and tracking tool, or the BAT pollutant load and reduction tool. It doesn't include the additional reductions that we'd be removing from the water body itself by improving the conditions around the existing outfall, where it's currently eroding, contributing TSS and so on and so forth into the lake itself. So that's being stabilized. So, there's those improvements as well, which are not really necessarily being taken credit for by the BMP improvement itself, but it's still something. Coming to some of the other project components, so we designed it for ease of construction. We didn't want to make this thing so prohibitively expensive or prohibitive that it was going to turn into a $250,000 improvement project that was going to have to be constructed with specialized equipment, and that couldn't be implemented by DCR themselves. I think DCR actually was able to utilize some on-call construction contracts, so they were able to basically build this thing using resources that they either had available or readily had available. In the future, there will be a walkway with stairs and a railing for pedestrian control and fishing access. So there are a couple of reasons behind that. One is to try and keep foot traffic away from the BMP itself, as well as providing an access to what people are currently using right now for fishing access down to the pond and the lake. So there's already kind of a preferential pathway or a desire path that people are using to get down to the lake to fish. So DCR is looking at providing a formalized access way down to the lake at some point in the future. I mentioned that we plugged and abandoned the existing outfall, which is the photo on the top right, and we relocated it down closer to the lake itself. So what this allows for is there's no more steep drop. There's a stabilized splash pad. And so you're not going to have nearly the erosive velocities and hopefully the flows that you're having right now that are coming down the photo in the bottom left there. We have the steep, eroded, undermined outfall area that's causing some erosion and potentially sedimentation into the lake. So kind of the final thing that we did is we actually designed an informational kiosk that was installed at the site. And you can see what it looks like, the overall kiosk design in this layout here. And there are a couple different components of it. The first is sort of a what and why of a background information that is designed towards park users. So things like, what is stormwater runoff? Why does it have detrimental environmental impacts? What type of contaminants may be in the stormwater runoff itself? And then as to why was it constructed, what is the function of it, how much will it treat, and the benefits of it. Then we have sort of this cartoonish layout of what it is itself, along with some of the key components that I touched on earlier. You have the upgradient drainage that's contributing to it, the inflow through the BMP itself, out of the outlet control structure, and then to the stabilized outfall uh, along Lake Quinsigamond. And then another kind of cartoonish version of the function of it in a profile view. So essentially the version of what I presented a few slides earlier about how this thing is working throughout the project itself. And all that gets incorporated into the kiosk design. So just to kind of close out here, so some of the challenges and the lessons learned, again, many site constraints, a steep site, retaining wall, lots of resource areas, a heavily used area, etc. I mean, this was done by design as part of the pilot project to showcase that, there are things that can be designed and implemented, not necessarily at a flat area, end of pipe type typical scenario where you would typically plan on constructing and designing and implementing a BMP. Limited available watershed, which again, most had already been disconnected. So we were kind of that further limited as to how much phosphorus and other pollutants we were able to remove from the site itself. Limited storage provided when running parallel to the slopes because we already have a 4-to-1 slope, so we can only kind of regrade it and carve out so much of an area before it's just going to get too steep or it's just not going to be a usable area. We really wanted to try and still preserve as much of the area as we can for park users and so on and so forth. Limited dollars for implementation. I mean, again, we didn't really want to make this a $250,000 construction and implementation project that was just going to be not really feasible or possible at a number of locations and other locations and other sites. So we wanted to kind of do a proof of concept that even with some relatively small dollar amounts, we can still do something here. And then again, based on not wanting to do infiltration because of the retaining wall, that further limits phosphorus removal because instead of going to an infiltration style BMP where you're typically getting better phosphorus removal numbers, you're limited to a sort of a filtration style BMP. So with that, that is pretty much it. I just wanted to thank specifically DCR for their involvement in this project. They were instrumental in getting the grants. They coordinated the project itself. They provided design review. They coordinated the construction. They were great. So just want to thank everyone for their support on this project. And I hope this presentation was beneficial.
Thanks,
So with
Nick.
that,
That's
I will.
great. Should we hold the questions till the end, Alex, you think?
Yes, I'd
Okay.
say hold questions and drop them in the Q&A chat so we have time for both presentations.
Sounds great.
Great.
Okay. So with that, I'll introduce then our friends and grantees with the Picasset Water Quality Coalition. Keith Barber has been um, amazing in his diligence and persistence in working on this project. And we also have I think Paula Serta is with us and Dan Barnett, who's former NRCS engineer serving as the consulting engineer on this project. And this is another 2023 SWIG grant that we provided to the Picasset Water Quality Coalition, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is in Bourne on the western end of Cape Cod. And it was one of our smaller grants at $37,000, but they've really done certainly one of our most cost-effective grants in the amount of really amazing work these guys have done, and a truly community-driven water quality project. So with that, I'll hand it over to Keith and Paula and Dan to tell you about this project.
Okay, so we're unfortunate to have followed Nick because we're as unprofessional as he is professional. So we're a total community organization. We have a whole bunch of volunteers, and I'm struggling with my screen here. So let me just figure out where I want to be. Let's do that. Let's do this. That didn't work either. So let's see. Sorry about that, folks. So anyway, while we're trying to figure this out, the our community group is all volunteers. Our best volunteer is sitting to my right here, Dan Barnett, who is our engineer. He's our designer. He was in the trenches with all of us, just working hard. So we have a screen up now. Can everybody see that screen? Are we sharing properly?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So just to give you an idea of who we are, where we are. So this is Buzzards Bay map, and you can see the little circle on the right-hand side is where Pocasset is. So like Tom said, we're a village in Bourne. So you can see if I use my cursor here. So for example, right here where the cursor is, that would be where the Bourne Bridge is. The Sagamore Bridge is to the right. And you can see on the opposite side, Marion is right across from us. So, we're little tiny Hen Cove part of Pocasset. So this is a drone video of the area that we were working on to try to improve the water quality. So this is Hen Cove, which is part of Red Brook Harbor. So you can see there's a dotted line that goes across the top of the cove, and that is the area that has been closed to shellfishing for, as anybody can best remember, probably 40 years. So the goal is to try to get rid of stormwater so we can have shellfishing at the head end of the cove. So this map is from Google Earth. So you can see we have our 3 rain garden locations here, rain garden 1, number 2, and 3. So the circles are streets that are all downhill to Hen Cove. So this whole area from right to left is downhill to the water. So for many, many, many years, the water is just being polluted by stormwater runoff. So when we started our organization in 2019, we were trying to figure out, okay, we've got a group now, we have the town's attention a little bit. What can we do to make the better faster? So septic obviously is the number 1 problem with water, but number 2 is stormwater runoff. So we got together with Dan, we worked on a plan, and we went to Tom, and we were astounded that we actually got the money. Bunch of people sitting in Paula's house trying to figure out how to get a grant. So from there, we went and we started our project. And so I think Nick has gone over quite a bit of this already, but this is Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and this is their rain garden layout. It's intended for someone putting a rain garden in their home, but we took it and made it full size, so to speak, with Dan's help. So you can see, probably one of the main things that we had to make sure we did was we need all natural plants, and they need to be deep rooted. So we work with our friends at Association to Preserve Cape Cod. We work with Mahoney's Garden Center here in Falmouth, and we made a list of plants, and then that's part of the plant list. And here we are now at the very beginning. This is a month before we started our rain garden. So it started at the lower left corner of your picture, went right through all the way to the brush you can see at the far end. So from there, we went to our next slide, which, believe it or not, a month later, all these weeds grew from zero to that while we were getting started. So now we're going to go to our next slide. So this is Dan in the orange shirt and Paula to his left with the blue jacket. This is the first day of building, which was June 10th, 2025. And we got started. Dan, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about how we got to this point.
Sure. So the main thing to do with the rain garden is to capture the runoff coming down the hills at a pretty good velocity and from the flat sections of Circuit Ave, which is parallel to the rain garden. And there was some existing outlet stone for outlet protection before we started. So this was the spot that was chosen for 3 weirs, a granite weir to allow flow into the rain garden, and an overflow weir that would bypass flows in excess of the 1-inch water quality event. And a third weir was for the outlet of the rain garden when it became too full. And this particular site services about 7,000 square feet. The rain garden is just about the correct size for it. We're limited to the amount of area that was available. And the other design criteria was 2 feet of separation between the bottom of the groundwater, the bottom of the rain garden and the groundwater elevation. And then Keith and Paula had many, many volunteers there, and they just carried granite and carried riprap and stone and concrete bags that granite curbs were placed in. And they really took something that was on a piece of paper and made it real.
So we had, excuse me, we had super community involvement, including businesses who we approached to say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you help us? And the construction people that you see in the previous slide, that's a local landscaping company who volunteered to help us for an incredibly reduced rate of cost. So in addition to that, we had the Mahoney's people in Falmouth gave us a tremendous discount on plants. The plants we had were all according to the guideline from the Association to Preserve Cape Cod and from the Bourne Conservation Department, who supervised the project from the beginning when we had to get permission to just start. So as you can see, we did on our first day, was a bit challenging. We got going early, and then about 1 o'clock we had a thunderstorm. That was the end of working for that day. So we came back the next day, and we kept going with all of Paula's volunteers, who you can see just kept the project moving.
Oh, so I had the pleasure of being the volunteer coordinator, and really Keith did the hardest part. He knows every person in this neighborhood and in the neighborhoods close by. So getting people to help was easy for me because he had already talked to a lot of people about it. And we ended up, after the 3 rain gardens were done, I did a total of about 53 or 54 people that had volunteered at different stages in all 3 of the gardens at different times. And it was a real grassroots effort. And I mean that literally. I was thinking that as I was looking at these slides. I mean, people were down on their knees with pulling grass and planting grass at the same time. You can also, I haven't seen these slides in a while. Looking at them now, I'm thinking this would be like a really perfect cover for the AARP magazine. We did the gardens in the middle of the week. I think we started on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then one of them we went to Thursday. And all three of the gardens were done in the middle of the week. So that eliminated some of the volunteers that wanted to be with us that had to work. So the age group was, mostly retirees here. And I got to say, they did very, very well. That pile of gravel that you saw had to be put into a wheelbarrow and then spread out, and it got done. And I have to say, it was a really gratifying experience, and it has been. And I still have people coming up to me to volunteer for the next project.
So you can see as we go through the slides, we had the material that you see in the rain garden here we're planting is it's called an erosion blanket, and we needed to put that in based on Bourne Conservation telling us how we needed to preserve this going forward so it maintained itself. And we really were very, very excited about how it turned out. The gardens are now, functioning. We'll get to a little slideshow later about what they all look like now. So for the first winter, we had a couple of people come by, experts to tell us how the plants did for the winter. And every single plant in all three rain gardens survived this harsh winter. So we planted well, and we had great advice on what to plant. So this is a small group of the people when of our volunteers when we got to the very end of Rain Garden 1, which took us the better part of 3 days because other than Dan, the rest of us were just, okay, what do we do next? So it was a lot of fun. So let's see if I can do this properly. Go like that. Sorry, we're definitely showing our amateur side here. So now we get to building rain gardens 2 and 3, which we're doing both of those at the same time, because they were much smaller and we had more help. So I'm going to get to the slide here where you can see Dan always in his uniform for building rain gardens. And our friends again at CMS Landscaping. So this was one of the fun parts. So for the second and third rain gardens, school was on. So we were able to get the Upper Cape Technology environmental students to come and help us. So Paula, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. When we did the first garden, there was a little learning curve. Picking up those granite pieces and placing them where they needed to go was challenging for the group that was working on it. So this group that you're looking at right now came in very handy for the second rain garden. I think they enjoyed the process and it worked.
And a lot of these kids didn't know, what are you talking about? What's a rain garden? So here we were trying to, educate them a little bit. And you can see as we go along, they were definitely in the mode to get it done. This is Rain Garden 3, which we had split the kids and the volunteers into 2 groups. So we were building number 2 and number 3 at the same time. So you can see the granite pieces there right on a pallet on the ground. And like Paula said, when we were lifting the granite pieces in the first garden, it was mostly like a bunch of 60 and 70-year-olds. We were so excited to have the 15, 16, and 17-year-olds show up to help us. There's a couple of them right there working with making some cement. And it was more fun, and the kids had fun. They enjoyed it. They thanked us for letting them be part of it. They're right down there in the trenches. We have these T-shirts which we used as a fundraiser a few years ago. So we had some left over. So all the kids that wanted a T-shirt got one of our Picasset water quality T-shirts as a reward, which of course is pretty lame. So anyway, the day that the kids came, we bought them pizza for lunch, and they enjoyed that. and they had to leave because school gets out at like 2:10, so they had to leave us. And the rest of the afternoon, we were just a bunch of back to the old people again. And here we are, here we are planting. This is Rain Garden 2, which happens to be right across the street from Paula's house. And I think she's right in the center there with her head down, working on planting. So this is Rain Garden 3, which has the least amount of water probably of the three of them because the hill is not as steep, but it still is very effective. When there's a good sized rainstorm, we get a little puddle in one of the corners, and that's filtering that water before it goes back underground into Hen Cove. So that would be the end of the day for Rain Garden 2. And then it's another group picture, which again is probably half the people that were really involved in that. So now we'll go back over here. So now we'll like to show you what all of our work turned out to be. This is what the rain gardens look now. All these pictures have been taken in the last 2 weeks. So this is Rain Garden 1 with its beautiful hibiscus flowers. And one thing we haven't mentioned, so you can see the little sign, white sign in the lower right-hand corner. So we have a guy in the sign business who lives about 300 yards from here, from this location. So we went to Matt and said, this is what we want to do. So we end up having, you can see if you look closely, there's 2 QR codes. This sign is in all 3 of the rain gardens. Whoops. No, don't do that. What are you doing, dumbass? So the QR code on the left is to the links to the APCC, What is a Rain Garden? And the QR code on the right links to a list of all the sponsors and groups that helped us to do this. And those very effective if Verizon only could make internet available all the time. So this is, again, Rain Garden 1. And you can see just next to that telephone pole on the right, that's the downhill from Sacco Road, which is very steep. And that drains right back down along the side of the street, along the gutter, and ends up in the rain garden, which is it's great to watch when it actually is raining and it happens. Continuing on with what we look like now. And that's from the other angle, looking backwards towards the beginning of the rain garden. So all that construction with the weirs is kind of across the street from that car that's parked there. So this is what Rain Garden 2 looks like right now. And there it is, a little close-up of some of the plants, some of the flowers, and it's really an excellent tribute to the workers who, and this is a very very popular walking area. People are walking around all the time, and we're glad that they can take a look at how our work has turned out. So in Rain Garden 3, we have some butterfly plants, and you can, if you're standing looking at it for any 20-minute period, there's as many as 5 or 6 different monarch butterflies landing, getting their nectar and moving on. This is in the spring. We did some additional planting in Rain Garden 3. We got more water tolerant plants, which is important to keep because the areas flood and we get a little puddle here and there. So that's again Rain Garden 3. And you can see how close everything is. The water is on the other side of all 3 of these rain gardens. So what we're capturing is going in the water filtered as opposed to just going in the water and causing more harm. You can see this is from right down inside Rain Garden 3. It's we built a little area so when the water comes off the street, it kind of slows it down a little bit with these rocks and keeps the plants protected. more of that rain garden 3. There's our third little sign, which we got from Kiwi Signs, a Bourne business who, again, the owner lives right across the street from a couple of these. So this is one of our favorite pictures. This is from our dinghy dock boat dock, and this was taken by one of our friends about 2 years ago. So you can tell how beautiful our area is. Hen Cove is a kind of a best kept secret on the Cape, we think. And, we're so excited to have Tom and the SNEP people provide the funds so we could try to improve our water quality. In this picture, the rain garden 1 would be over just past that little boat that's docked. It's on a mooring. And rain garden 2 would be to the left of this picture, and number 3 would be on the other side of Hen Cove. So that is our story. Paula, Dan, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you said it all.
I think we're
You
good.
did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
that is who we are.
Thank you so much, Keith, Dan, Paula. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you, Tom, for introducing both of these presenters. And again, like Tom said, kind of highlighting the connections between, sharing out this important work and really, sparking ideas and interest across the region. We only have a few minutes, and I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to do a few questions. And I see, Nick, you have answered a few of them, so I will skip over those ones and first ask a question for both of you from Catherine Dana. She's curious, or they're curious, has any data been collected for either of these projects after the fact to determine what effect they've had on water quality?
I don't believe that DCR has collected any in situ data at the Quinsigamond project, nor am I sure that there's a plan to. I don't believe there's a plan to collect any actual in situ data.
We have in Pocasset, we have not collected any data at all. Some of the things we've heard already from some of our neighbors and friends is that the water seems clearer this year. So whether that's fact or whether it's just hopefulness, there are all positive comments from the neighborhood.
And then we have another question for Keith and team. Lauren wants to know how high the tide comes in at this location. It looks like it is potentially a high marsh area. Did you plant salt-tolerant plants?
Well, we planted all saltwater tolerant plants. So the tide normally in all 3 of these locations would not get that high. We spent about 6 months in the beginning of 2025 checking the tides when there was a moon tide or our highest tide, and the tide really never got close. Rain Garden 1 especially has a very solid berm that when we use that erosion blanket, it should protect it.
Great. And then I think I'm going to jump and ask a question of Nick. I am jumping around a little bit. So for presentation number 1, why not terrace the slope and use, why not terrace the slope and use impervious pavers on the parking lot?
I think you probably mean permeable pavers. I'm not entirely sure what the question is. If you're talking about expanding the parking lot and expanding the parking lot onto the flat area and using permeable pavers. I guess I don't fully understand the question, but certainly permeable pavers or permeable pavement is certainly an option. Grant funding, I think we only have $50,000, which isn't really going to buy a whole lot of pavement or anything. So trying to be, I guess the answer is trying to kind of be cognizant of project costs and so on and so forth, and trying to make it constructible by DCR and their contractors. So
Great.
that's my answer.
We do have a couple more questions, and we are at time. So what I'm gonna do is share these questions with the presenters after the fact, and maybe we can share out brief answers to them when we send out the recording for today's webinar. It's great to see so many questions, so much interest in both of these projects. So again, I just want to thank all of our presenters today. Thank you, Tom, for introducing the SWIG grant program. And thank you everybody for participating. This has been a really great learning opportunity, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Hey, great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom, for the money.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great presentations. Appreciate it. Great work.